would like to describe a problem that everyone experiences and that everyone knows, but very few people like to talk about. It's a very real problem, a very widespread problem, but a social stigma surrounds it, such that people don't like to talk about it. And that those who do try to talk about it are often accused of being weak, for example, or of being insufficiently modern, perhaps. It's a problem that all of you know. Now, the photograph behind me doesn't have anything to do with the problem itself, by the way. It's just a lovely photograph of a field in Germany, but it's also the exact place where I had this idea for the first time back in 2004. What's interesting about this photo is that this was shot in one of the most developed, industrialized, modern, wealthy countries in the entire world, right? Modern Germany. But you'll see not a single sign of human civilization here, except for the little hunting stand in the corner. And you see no people either. That tells you something about what my theme is. This is an experience that all of you have had even when you were infants, even when you were very, very small. You felt it for the first time when you were a small baby and your parents put you down in your bed so that they could get some sleep of their own or maybe run some errands. You felt it when you were a child, when someone who you were very close to, one of your best friends perhaps, someone that you looked up to, wanted to spend time with someone else instead of with you. You felt it when you moved out on your own away from the parental nest for the first time in your lives. You felt it when you went to any kind of crowded public place and you got to see all the relationships that other people have with each other that you are not allowed to join or not invited to join. The experience is called loneliness. A very deep, very profound experience that everyone has. Loneliness is a very, very complicated experience. It's full of our relationships with ourselves as well as one another, and our relationships with our own mind and heart and body and so on. You can feel very lonely even in a very crowded place, surrounded by thousands of people, like at this photograph that I shot of a cultural festival in France. There's a lot of world travel in my photographs, by the way. You can feel profoundly close and connected to someone, even while you're in like a sailboat in the middle of the Atlantic and you're 3,000 kilometers away from the nearest other human being. You can crave companionship, even at the same time that you crave solitude. This thought, as paradoxical as it may appear, is actually surprisingly common as well. It appeared, for example, in the very brave admission of actor Stephen Fry's suicide attempt in 2012. He wrote on his blog that he wants to be left alone, but he does not want to be alone. So it's a complicated experience. It's also a much more widespread experience than most people acknowledge. In 2006, a study that I found, an American study, discovered that 1/4 of all the people that they surveyed had no friends at all. And 1/2 of all the people that they surveyed had only one person in their life that they could confide in about the deepest and the highest problems in their lives. The same study also found that about 1/4 of all American households, the most reliable information about this comes from the United States, so that's where I'm using that data. 1/4 of all American households surveyed at the time consisted in just one person. That was, more than double the rate of social isolation of 20 years previously. And by the way, in the 1930s, the US Census found that only 1/10 of US households consisted of just one person. Let's think about this for a minute in the light of all the connectivity that we have mostly through internet technology. We've all got things like Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and all the different means in which people share information about their lives with one another. We even have the phone. I don't know if anyone still uses the phone, but that's what the phone is really for, right? We have many, many new ways to connect with one another and to get in touch with each other and to hook up or something like that. Notice the use of the language of machine function in the way that we talk about our relationships, by the way. We say things like, let's hook up, or we connected, or they broke apart, right? We have so many more ways to do that. And yet, all the major social indicators show that we are more isolated from one another. Not less, more. Isn't that interesting now? Many people might say, though, that there's an important distinction between loneliness and being alone. They might want to say that one is a deeply painful psychological experience. The other is the mere absence of people, and that's not so bad after all. You can be happy or unhappy with or without people. That's certainly true. Some people may also want to point to social or economic or political explanations for why there's apparently more social isolation in our world now than than there has ever been before. We might point to factors like increased population density of major cities, which creates stress for people, or factors like the increased disparity between the rich and the poor, which also creates a lot of stress in people's lives, especially now as the poor in developed and developing countries, I know those are strange categories, but I'll live with them for the moment. The poor in such countries are able to see all the wealth that they are not allowed to have. And this also creates a lot of stress in people's lives too, for various reasons. You may even feel that individualism, the most, in a way, modern of all social values that we have today, increases the distance that people have from one another, isolates people from one another. And why is that? Well, I'm sure that all the social and economic and political explanations are true. I have no doubt that they are true. But I think that they are not the real explanation. I'm a philosopher, so I like to look at things from a different kind of point of view. I want to see what is the nature of the problem at its highest and deepest level. And I think that loneliness is a real problem, and that we will not be able to deal with this problem properly until we acknowledge it as a real problem, see it for what it truly is, and understand what it's like to experience that. Making sense so far? Okay. Now, many of you may say that there's some obvious ways out. You know, you might say, all you need is love, right? Love lifts us up where we belong. Love is a many-splendored thing. It's like something that's written in every pop song ever written, and so we never have any kind of alternative narrative what to do. If someone says you're lonely, that's somehow your fault because there's everybody else around you, and all you need to do is fall in love. Well, that may well be helpful, and you may be able to enjoy a wonderful life very close to the person who you love, and always be happy because you spend every waking moment with that person. But at the end of the day, one of you falls asleep before the other one does, and consigns the other to solitude for a while. So even that's not an escape. And I'm sorry to remind you, but at one point in your future, one of you will die before the other one does as well, and consigning the other person in that relationship to solitude again, rather more permanently. Some of you might be religious, and then you might say, well, the solution to loneliness then is to reach out to God. And that's a very plausible solution for many people who happen to be religious. And however, I think that even that is actually not a very good solution either. Let's imagine that God exists and that God is some of the things that people say about God. They might say that God is an infinite being, for example. Right around the Middle Ages, people started to use the mathematics language to describe God. They would say things like, God is an infinite being. Well, if that's the case, God is probably lonelier than you are. And here's why. Think about God's creation. Think about all those galaxies and supernova and black holes and nebulas and things, you know. Our telescopes are now able to see objects that are something like 37 billion light years away. Think about all of that wonderful, beautiful, universe that we live in, that if you're religious, you might believe is created by God. It's wonderful. Now let's think about all the empty space between all of those objects. What's the distance between here and the nearest star other than our sun? It's the star Proxima Centauri. It's approximately 4.2 light years away. You and I can mathematically, rationally contemplate this number. We can imagine that distance. If God exists, God probably feels that distance as an ache in her heart, right? Because that's an awful lot of mostly empty space. So if you are religious and you think that reaching out to God is the answer to your loneliness, no, it's not, I'm sorry to tell you. God is lonelier than you are. Because loneliness is not just a social condition, it is not just a political circumstance or an economic arrangement. Well, it is those things, but it is also an existential condition. It is a way of our being in the world. And since it is a way of being in the world, there's nothing you can do about it, really. There's no cure for it. There's not even a prevention. I know that in TED we normally like more uplifting and optimistic kind of talks, and just told you that you're inherently lonely and it's nothing you can do about that. That's awful, and nobody wants to hear that at TED, but I'm afraid that I think that it's probably true. And I think that unless we face that existential loneliness properly, only then can we begin to lead better lives, create better relationships with one another, and find a truly lasting, permanent, and real kind of worthwhile life. Allow me to describe what I think might be not exactly a way out, but a way of pushing the boundaries of loneliness back so that its force will not be so strong and that our lives can be a little bit better for that. By the way, before I get to that, though, I want to tell you that loneliness is actually not the problem. The many, many insane, crazy, ridiculous, self-destructive, and harmful things that we do to avoid loneliness, that is the problem. And that's a problem we can solve too, actually. And some of those problems are very simple and probably harm no one. Think about somebody who, when they go home and they happen to be by themselves for a few hours, the first thing that they'll do is turn on the television or the radio. Not because they want to listen or to watch, but because they can't stand the silence. Many of you know people who are like that. Many of you maybe do that yourselves and don't want to admit it. You know? That's relatively harmless. There's other things that people do that might be more destructive to others as well as to themselves, that they do for the sake of preventing the experience of loneliness from arising in their mind. Think about people who go onto the internet in order to troll. Right? They just create suffering for themselves and for others. They create stress, they create hard feelings and all kinds of peer pressure and bullying and that sort of thing. The only attraction or attention that they attract to themselves is hostility, but at least they're attracting attention to themselves, and that is better than loneliness for a lot of these people. That's one of the reasons why people do that, right? And other things that people do to prevent the experience of loneliness are even more destructive than that, and I'm thinking primarily of addictions here. Addictions to the internet, addictions to gambling, addictions to shopping, addiction to video games, substance abuse, addiction to violence, for that matter, addictions of all kinds whose real purpose is to allow your minds to contemplate something other than yourself and your own existence and your own situation here as a human being on Earth at this time in the history of the universe. That's where the problem really is, right? It's in all these destructive things that we do to ourselves and to each other to avoid loneliness. Now, why do people not want to look at themselves? Why do they want to avoid this experience? Well, because when you are alone, and you have only yourself and your own thoughts in front of you, the place where you look is inside your own self, right? You examine yourself, as Socrates would say. A lot of people really don't like what they see, and they will do very nearly anything to avoid having to see themselves as they really are. They might feel fear, they might feel anxiety, they might feel guilt or shame, or they might feel the pain of unrequited love or the pain of great plans and dreams that broke down. They might feel begrudging resentment, all the kinds of problems that arise when you've got no stimulation outside of your mind, and then you look at yourself and people often really don't like what they see. And social pressures may exacerbate that and make it worse. Advertising, for example, which creates anxiety in a lot of people's minds. But there's more to it than that too, actually. There's also an existential level where if you are on your own and you're only looking at yourself, you might suddenly contemplate the idea that your life has no meaning. You might give a venue to the thought that your life is utterly worthless and that you will disappear at some point and no one will miss you. Right? And a lot of people just don't want to face that possibility. It's one of the deepest fears that we have, the most unacknowledged and yet the most profound fear that people have, that their life might actually mean nothing. Nobody wants to contemplate that. And so they'll do very nearly anything to avoid that experience. Now I'd like to describe to you what I think we can do about it. It doesn't exactly solve the problem of loneliness because, as I said, it is an existential condition. It's a part of our way of being in the world, so there's really nothing you can do about it. But there are things that we can do to push the frontiers of loneliness back and create more meaningful relationships with our world and a more worthwhile, meaningful life. And here is how I got the idea. This is a photograph at a shot of near a highway in northern Ontario of an Inukshuk. Now, when I came back to Canada in 2006, people were building Inukshuks everywhere. Partly because they had just created the new territory of Nunavut, and there's an Inukshuk on the flag, and Canadians were adopting the Inukshuk as a new national symbol. It was even the icon of the Vancouver Winter Games not long ago. And for a little while, I had a government job in which I was working with Aboriginal people, and someone who I was working with explained to me why Inuit people build the Inukshuks, what it means to them. I was told that it makes the land less lonely. If you've never been to the high Arctic, you might not know what to look for. You might see a landscape that looks very empty, very bleak, very barren, right? Just fields of rocky stone in the summer, fields of ice in the winter. But if you happen to be passing a place where someone has built an Inukshuk, well, you know that there have been people here before. Now you know that you're not really passing through a totally empty land. Now you know that there are people somewhere, right? What the Inukshuk does is it shows us that there is a sign of a human presence somewhere in the world. I've also had it subsequently explained to me that there's a code in those Inukshuks too, right? If the Inukshuk is just a pile of stones, that means that there's a potable water nearby. If it has arms, there's a food cache nearby. If it also has a head, that means there's a human settlement nearby as well. By the way, if you were a tourist in the north, that's why they ask you not to build Inukshuks, right? For those who have to survive up there, the tourist-built Inukshuks throw people off when they need, the real signals to survive. That aside, the existential part that I want to draw attention to, though, is the fact that this is a way of showing that this is an inhabited world, that there are people out there. And whatever else this symbol might mean, whatever other codes are involved about the location of food caches and other supplies, what does this symbol tell you? It tells you, I am here. The basic statement that was enacted by the person who built this monument, the statement is, I am here. And then I began to wonder, maybe this is what everything that we build is really telling us. What about a monument like this one? Which I don't really know what it is. I photographed it on the way here, and No, I'm just kidding. But, it's a practical building too, right? It is a radio and television broadcast tower. That was the reason it was built in the first place. But it is also a sign of a human presence. It also says, whatever else it also says, I am here, right? There are people here. Isn't everything that we do also saying, whatever else it might be saying, isn't it also saying, I am here? The best way to experience this is to listen to music that is composed and performed in a language you don't understand, okay? Because you won't know what's being said. You won't know whether it's a story about great heroic deeds done in the past, or whether it's a story about a heartbreaking, relationship that ended, or whether it's a story about a funny thing that happened on the way to the forum. It could be anything like that, but it is also, whatever else it is, somebody somewhere saying, I am here. And what this does is it pushes the boundaries of loneliness back a little bit. In fact, even now, there are things that we have built. You could call them monuments, I suppose, but things that we have built whose purpose is utilitarian in one way, is to gather information for us so we can learn more about the world, and then we can use science to be more inspired about the world, and also use technology to apply what we have learned to commercial products and things like that. But it also makes a statement about who we are, that we are here. It makes a statement about our human presence in the world, and it is sending that message out to we don't know who. I'm thinking about the message that was put on this monument. I had a real hard time photographing this, by the way. It was one of the most expensive photographs I've... No, I'm just kidding. This is Wikimedia. It's a Creative Commons picture. But on the Voyager space probe, there is a gold plaque and also a gold record that has information about the fact that we are here, the mere fact that we are here. That is a much more profound kind of message than we might realize at first. And it says something about what we are as well. We are a society that is able to build this thing, right? And has this technology, and has this interest in science and this kind of curiosity. It tells us that we are here, and that this is what we are. There's a third segment as well to this message, this revelation. It also says, is anyone else out there? That's why we have a plaque on it that tells us, the universe, whoever might discover it, something about the location of our planet in this galaxy, and something about who we are. There are greetings recorded in 50 languages, for example, and songs in a variety of languages and styles as well. It also asks to anyone who might be out there to hear the question, is anyone else out there? And that's what all these same monuments that I was describing also ask. The same with the Neolithic stone monuments, the same with the cemetery monuments, the CN Tower. Anything that we build, not only for its utilitarian purpose, but also for its statement of presence in the world. It asks, is anyone else out there? Someone somewhere might reply and say, yes, I'm out there too. There is more than just you in the world. There's me as well. And when people get together and they can create a new statement between them, it changes the I of the I am here into we. We are here. This, I think, is the basis of art and music and theater and architecture and all these things. I think it is also the basis of sound relationships as well. Healthy, meaningful, worthwhile, enriching human relationships with each other individually as well as in groups, with our environment, with whomever else might be out there that will discover the space probe someday. It's that which we build that asks the question, is anyone else out there? And if someone answers and says yes, then with that person you have a chance to create we are here. Even me standing here on the stage, speaking to all of you, whatever else I might be saying, I am also saying, I am here, right? And so are all of you, merely by showing up, also saying, by your presence, I am here, and this is what I am. And is anyone else out there? Maybe someday someone will say yes, and then you can get together with that person. You have a chance to push the boundaries of loneliness back again, create something sacred. You know what the sacred is? It is that which serves as your partner in your search for the highest and deepest things. So it could be something religious, it could be God, but it could also be something very simple, like the kitchen table where you and your family and friends eat dinner together. Right? That's the sacred is. And that's what the I am here allows to emerge. It's that which emerges from relationships when those relationships are healthy, but when we are founding our relationship upon this statement of presence that pushes the boundaries of loneliness back a little bit, makes our world more interesting, more inhabited, more beautiful maybe. All right? So something I would like all of you to do today, sometime today during the break or afterwards, get in touch with someone who is very important to you, but whom you have not spoken to in a long time. And remind that person that you're there, and be reminded that that friend of yours is also here on earth as well. And see if you can, again, create a meaningful relationship with that person. See that you can push back the boundaries of loneliness for the both of you again, as you once did. Sound like a good idea? All right, thank you very much for your time.